Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Let's talk about math in Final Fantasy V. Okay, so my focus will be on the gameplay, and I want to talk about the math involved with that, and talk about its particular job system, and some cool things that you could do with that. So yeah, we're gonna get into it, and you're free to assume spoilers ahead. I'm gonna stay away from the story for the most part, but there are some things that I am going to discuss. My main thing is I do have beef with a particular character, and I am absolutely going to mention that. And just the basics, though, because I just don't want to illustrate that I think it's like ridiculous. But we'll get to that. So yeah, you can assume there's spoilers to be ahead if you want to be safe, but I'm going to largely avoid them. Uh, you know, overall. So just there we go. I don't know. It's getting late, and this is not my first video today. So okay, so with Final Fantasy V, us get into it. Right, with Final Fantasy V, it does its own thing, while also building on just stuff that you find in Final Fantasy in general. But it's this weird thing with like 1, 3, and 5 because they're all centered around like that idea of jobs. With one, it's there and it's just kind of like a given. With three, it's like, hey, we're really gonna get carried away with jobs now, right? You have a lot more customization there. With five, it's like even more so. So let's get into the basics and then we can talk about the jobs a little later. Okay, so with the basics, it's like this, right? With the Final Fantasy games, right, they have different combat systems, sure, but they get at the same thing, the idea that you are dishing out damage while trying to avoid taking it, right? And if you're taking it, you're trying to either negate it or, diminish it or recover from it. And all of a while, like, right, that's it, right? That's the basics. And but some things come into play because, like, hey, well, let's um, introduce some buffs or debuffs that enter the battle. Let's have status effects. Let's have different protective measures. All those sort of things. And all the while, you're getting experience points and you're leveling up. And what that looks like in each Final Fantasy game, it varies. Two, for instance, you didn't level up overall. You leveled up like your stats, you leveled up your weapons, you leveled up your magic. And it gets at the same thing, right? Because like when you're seeing that overall level, what's happening, right? You're getting better weapons in the story. um, your stats are being boosted. You have more capabilities, more abilities and all that. So it gets at the same thing, just presented in a different way. And so here with five, it does have that overall level system. So you're gaining experience points, you're leveling up, and your stats are boosting that way. But you also have different jobs that you can take on throughout the course of the game, and those jobs are getting like ability points, and they're leveling up. And you can master those abilities, right? And here's the thing, right? You're gaining different abilities and then mastering any given job to be able to do even more and use those abilities in other forms because the way it works here is like you have the jobs and these jobs they have different, I'm saying abilities a lot, but they have different like abilities that you can use in battle, right? And they also have different stats associated with them, right? And how things are distributed. And as you master them, you can start using different abilities. It's late. Let me give you an example of what I mean. If you're a black mage, for instance, right? You're mastering different elements of that black mage, and by the time that you master it, you can take some of those abilities with you. So, like, if I mastered a black mage, and I learned different things along the way. If I'm a white mage, for instance, I can use black mage magic, right? And vice versa. Or, if I am a night class and I'm learning, all these different abilities and stuff, it's like, hey, I can take that to another um job like monk or something. Or if I'm a knight and I've mastered the white mage magic, it's like I can pair those two things. So it's like, hey, I have a knight who can use white magic. Or if I'm like a ninja class, which is an awesome class, I dig it. One of my favorite, if not my favorite job in that game. It's like, hey, well, maybe I can throw things, right? There's other abilities too, but that's the big one. And it's like, so then I have like some secondary ability that I can pair from it. So it's just like if I am in ninja class, I can already throw, and I can bring in a secondary ability that I learned from some other um, job if I wanted to. And if I mastered ninja class, there's any number of abilities that I can use. I can use the throw. Um, I'm forgetting some of the other ones, but the idea is like, hey, I can pair those with others. I feel like I'm sounding redundant, but I'm tired, but I'm trying to get it apart, things across, and I hope that's working for you. But here's the thing, too, that like I don't think it really gets talked about in the game as much, but right when you're mixing and matching and trying different jobs, I think it's good because it keeps the game play fresh, and you can learn and do some interesting things and really get in there with the customization. But here's the other cool part about that: if you are mastering these different jobs, right? Like you can take it back to the first job that you have, like because at the beginning of the game, right, your four characters they have the freelancer class, which on its own doesn't seem like much, right? It's like hey, it could use different types of weapons because like there are different jobs where they're restricted to using a certain type of weapons, but with the freelancer they can pretty much use anything, right? um, but at first it seems like, oh well, that's it, right? But here's the thing: once you start mastering jobs, right, the stat boosts and like there are some stat boosts and abilities that come with those different jobs that they are automatically added to that freelancer job. So it's like if you're mastering like a crap ton of jobs, like by the time you get to the game, into the game, right, and you're ready to, fight the big bad, you can have everyone use their freelancer class, having like, master things like, knight, ninja, black mage, white mage, all these classes like that, so you can get like the most out of your stat boost and have the most out of your HP, the most out of your MP, be a force to be reckoned with, and give them different abilities to like make sure you're recovering, making sure you're just dishing out the damage. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of fun to be had, a lot of customization, and I think overall, it's a great game. Um, and so it's like I'm kind of glad that I kind of played that in the middle of a bunch of other Final Fantasy games, like when I first played it, because like I feel like if I had played it right after four, like I did this time, I would have been like, oh well, it's great, but it's not four. But I had already played five first, so I was able to like, appreciate that for what it was, because it's a great game. It's just like you might have certain preferences towards other Final Fantasy games. Um, so I do want to mention one other thing. I'm not going to go into the plot too much because like it's there, it's serviceable. But I wanted to mention the big bad because I think he's dumb. Um, so the big bad from five is X-Def, and I don't like him as a villain. He's just kind of like run of the mill, except for one thing. He's a sentient tree. They go into that in the game. And it's like it won't make you think it's any less dumb. And that's the one thing I couldn't shake from five. Is like, five. A lot of customization, great job system, but it's also that one Final Fantasy game where the big bad's a tree. In its true form, like, uh, it's bad, but not the worst thing in the world. I wanted to get that out of my system because I replayed five recently, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. How could I forget? You know. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say about math and Final Fantasy five.